You ever notice how every few months there's this video that goes viral with a title like, "Oh, once men realize this, women are finished"? It's always said with this wild mix of confidence and bitterness, like the person just cracked the code to the universe. But the truth is, there's no secret, no hidden formula that destroys women or exposes relationships. What really happens when men start knowing things? Really knowing isn't the end of women. It's usually the beginning of understanding themselves. Let's get real for a second. When people say women are finished, what they're actually saying is, I've been hurt, I've been played, and now I'm trying to protect myself by flipping the script. It's a defense mechanism dressed up as enlightenment. It sounds powerful. It sounds like payback. But what it really is deep down is fear of being vulnerable again, fear of being outsmarted, fear of being seen. And that fear hides under the mask of a truth. But here's where it gets interesting. Because yes, there are truths about relationships that everyone should know. Truths that actually make you stronger, not colder, like the fact that attraction isn't a mystery. It's communication, attention, and energy. Or that love doesn't fade because someone changed. It fades because someone stopped trying. And that no matter how much a game you think you've learned, if you use it to control someone instead of connect with them, you've already lost. People love to talk about manipulation. You used me. She only wanted my money. She just wanted attention. And sure, those things happen. But manipulation isn't gendered. It's human. Men do it. Women do it. Everyone does it when they don't feel safe or seen. So when men start to wake up and see patterns in dating, when they start learning about hypergamy or emotional leverage or female psychology, they often think they've stumbled onto some forbidden knowledge. But understanding those patterns doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. Once you see the game, your job isn't to beat people at it. It's to rise above it. Let's talk about power. Because that's what this whole once men know this conversation is really about. Power in relationships. Who has it? Who loses it? Who hides it? And power always shifts depending on who cares less. The person who is least emotionally invested controls the tone. And that's the trap so many men and women fall into. They start loving with a scoreboard in their hand. Every text, every compliment, every silence is a move in a game they never agreed to play. But here's the thing about real strength. It doesn't come from withholding love. It comes from offering it wisely. There's nothing powerful about becoming emotionally unavailable just because someone hurt you. There's nothing impressive about pretending you don't care. The real challenge is learning how to care without losing yourself. To see people clearly, not as angels or villains, but as humans. When men learn the truth about women, they often think they've uncovered something dark. Like, oh, women only respect men they can't fully have. Or, women want providers but cheat with excitement. There's a little truth in every stereotype, but only a little. What's missing is the context. People respect mystery not because they're shallow, but because boundaries create value. People crave excitement not because they're evil, but because comfort can turn into complacency. The same patterns that make men chase success are the ones that make women crave passion. It's not a conspiracy, it's human nature. What destroys relationships isn't the truth, it's how we weaponize it. When a man discovers that confidence attracts women, he can use that knowledge to become secure in himself or to manipulate. When a woman realizes men respond to peace, not chaos, she can use that to build harmony or to fake calmness she doesn't feel. The truth doesn't destroy anyone. What destroys us is what we do once we know it. Think about it. If knowing more about human behavior made people happy, then psychologists would have perfect relationships. They don't. Because awareness is only half the equation. The other half is humility. The ability to know something without turning it into ammunition. And look, a lot of men are tired. Tired of dating games, tired of being misunderstood, tired of being told they're the problem. And that's fair. A lot of women are tired too, for the same reasons. Everyone's walking around half defensive, half hungry for connection. And so we end up in this standoff where both sides think they're the victim. Both sides think they're the prize. And nobody wants to go first. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. You can't love from a defensive position. You can't connect while trying to protect your ego. Real love requires risk. It requires letting someone see you, flaws and all, knowing they could use that knowledge to hurt you. and hoping they won't. That's the risk every honest relationship demands. So no, women aren't finished when men start to understand them. Women evolve. Men evolve. And when both stop trying to one-up each other and start trying to understand each other, that's when something real begins. We live in a time where a knowing the truthy has become entertainment. Every podcast, every clip, every self-proclaimed guru is selling the truth, though, about the opposite sex. But information without emotional intelligence is dangerous. It turns love into a science experiment. You start analyzing every move your partner makes like a detective instead of loving them like a human. And what happens next? You stop listening. You start assuming. You start assuming. You stop forgiving. You start collecting data points to prove your point. Knowing human nature isn't supposed to make you cynical. It's supposed to make you compassionate. Because once you understand that everyone's fighting their own insecurities, everyone's trying to be loved in their own language, you stop trying to win and start trying to connect. The real truth that changes everything isn't about women or men. It's about yourself. Once you know what drives you, your fears, your wounds, your ego, you stop blaming the other side. You stop saying all women are like this is or all men are like that. You start seeing people as reflections, not opponents. So maybe the phrase should be different. Not a once men know this, women are finished. Maybe it should be a once men know themselves, everyone wins. Because when you know who you are, you stop falling for illusions. You stop chasing validation. You stop trying to control people. And that's when you finally have something real to offer. The truth won't destroy women. It will destroy delusion. It will end the fake games, the half-truths, the power struggles that keep everyone miserable. And in their place, it'll leave room for something deeper, mutual respect, emotional maturity, and peace. Because once men truly know, not just about women, but about themselves, nobody's finished. That's when the real story begins, and that's the part no one wants to hear. Because it's easier to believe that there's a secret out there, a magic sentence or hidden truth that flips the balance of power forever. It's easier to think that someone else is to blame, that relationships fail because a woman changed or a men stopped leading. But what really changed is how disconnected people became from the reality of love. Everyone wants to be understood, but few want to understand. Everyone wants loyalty, but few want to build trust. Everyone wants depth, but no one wants to be vulnerable long enough to reach it. We talk so much about truth, but we rarely talk about timing. Knowing the truth before you're ready for it can actually ruin you. They call it chemistry, but often it's just familiarity. The same emotional pattern wearing a new face. And until you recognize that, you'll keep repeating the same story with different names. When people talk about being finished, what they really mean is they're tired of losing control in love. They're tired of giving their best and feeling like it wasn't enough. They're tired of chasing affection that's conditional. So instead of healing, they armor up. They convince themselves they've outgrown feelings. That logic will protect them. But logic doesn't heal a heart that's afraid to trust. It just hides the fear beneath better vocabulary. You can study every book on relationships, every study on attachment styles, and still find yourself confused when emotions hit. Because human connection isn't linear. You can't map it like a business plan. It's unpredictable, messy, and raw. It asks for something that no theory can substitute: honesty. Not the performative kind, not the I'm just being real kind that people use to justify being cruel, but the quiet honesty that admits, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm trying. That's the kind that builds intimacy. That's the kind that lasts. The irony is, the more you know about people, the more compassionate you become, if you're learning for the right reasons. When you study to understand, you start to notice the humanity beneath the patterns. You see that the woman who seems manipulative is probably protecting her self-worth. The man who seems distant is probably afraid of being judged for being soft. Everyone's defense mechanism is just a language of fear. And when you learn that language, not to exploit it but to understand it, you stop needing to win and start learning how to love. The phrase "women are finished" comes from a misunderstanding of balance. It assumes that relationships are zero-sum, that for one side to gain power, the other must lose it. But that's not how real connection works. Power shared isn't power lost. The moment you stop competing, you start creating. You create safety, you create freedom, you create an environment where both can thrive without pretending. People are obsessed with control because control feels safer than trust. Control says, see if I predict your moves, I won't get hurt. Trust says, even if I can't predict you, I believe we'll find a way. One is rigid, the other is fluid. And the problem with rigidity is that it breaks under pressure. Control creates temporary peace but permanent distance. Trust creates occasional chaos but long-term closeness. If you're only comfortable when you're in control, you're not in love. You're in management. And that's what a lot of people mistake for confidence. They think being emotionally unavailable makes them strong. They think detachment is wisdom, but wisdom without warmth becomes arrogance. Strength without empathy becomes isolation. You can't be powerful in love if you're afraid to feel. Because feeling doesn't make you weak. It gives you range. It allows you to navigate the depth of another person without drowning in it. Men are starting to talk about their emotions in ways that used to be taboo. They're reading about boundaries, therapy, emotional regulation. They're learning that being masculine doesn't mean being numb. It means being steady. And that shift scares people who built their identity around old hierarchies. That's why phrases like, "a women are finished," gain traction. It's not truth, it's resistance to growth. Because if both genders start healing, there's nothing left to exploit. No war to fight, no power to grab. Just mutual accountability. And accountability is uncomfortable when you've built your confidence on blame. Every man who's been burned by love has two choices: build walls or build wisdom. It's strange how people chase certainty in love when certainty is the one thing love never promises. You can know everything about attraction, behavior, and compatibility and still end up surprised. You can analyze every text message, every reaction, every signal, and still misunderstand the moment. Well, because love doesn't live in logic. It lives in feeling, and feelings aren't meant to be controlled. They're meant to be understood. The problem is that so many people want to win at relationships instead of learning from them. They want to use knowledge as armor instead of guidance. But you can't outthink your way into intimacy. You have to feel your way through it, even when it's messy. What makes all this "oh, once men know" talk sound so seductive is that it offers the illusion of control. It says, if I just figure out how women think, I'll never be hurt again. But what it really teaches is avoidance. It tells men to withhold, to test, to manipulate outcomes instead of facing the discomfort of being real. It tells them that emotion equals weakness, when in truth, suppression is what keeps them fragile. Because every feeling you bury becomes a trigger later. Every time you refuse to feel, you hand power to the very thing you're trying to escape. There's a difference between understanding someone and controlling them. Understanding invites empathy. Control demands obedience. And yet, people keep confusing the two. They study each other like puzzles to solve, when the real task is learning how to coexist without losing yourself. You don't need to decode someone to love them. You need to listen. You need to be curious. You need to understand that every person you meet comes with an entire history you didn't live, full of reasons for why they act the way they do. Once you learn that, arrogance fades. Compassion takes its place. Men who really start to know things don't walk around quoting theories. They just carry themselves differently. They don't chase approval because they've learned that peace feels better than being right. They don't try to impress because they've learned that presence is louder than performance. They don't need to manipulate because they've realized that people who are meant for you won't need to be convinced. When you really understand the truth, it simplifies everything. You stop overanalyzing and start observing. You stop reacting and start responding. And women feel that shift immediately. Because what women crave isn't dominance, it's steadiness. They want to feel safe, not controlled, heard, not handled. When a man can look at a woman and see her complexity without trying to reduce her to a formula, she softens. That's what emotional intelligence does. It disarms defensiveness. The moment men realize this, the old game collapses. Because games only exist when people are afraid. Once you stop being afraid of losing someone, you stop playing. But fear runs deep and it wears many masks. For some, it's anger. For others, it's pride. You hear it in statements like, "I'll never trust anyone again," or "I'm just focusing on myself," said not from peace but from pain. Healing requires honesty about that fear. You can't transform something you refuse to admit. You can't find truth if you keep hiding behind toughness. At some point, you have to let the mask crack, even if it scares you. Especially if it scares you. Because the moment you face your own fear of vulnerability, you realize no one ever had power over you. It was your avoidance that did. Every relationship is a mirror reflecting who you are at that stage of your life. When you're insecure, you attract validation. When you're whole, you attract harmony. When you're wounded, you attract lessons disguised as love. It's not that everyone is toxic. It's that some connections are meant to show you where you still need to grow. The danger lies in mistaking those lessons for destiny. Emotional intelligence doesn't erase emotion. It teaches you how to handle it without losing yourself. It's learning to pause before reacting, to choose curiosity over accusation, to say that hurt instead of you're wrong. When men reach that level of balance, the whole dynamic shifts. Because emotional balance doesn't just benefit the person, it transforms the relationship. Suddenly, arguments don't spiral. Insecurities don't turn into blame. Silence doesn't become punishment. It's a steadiness that allows both people to be honest without fear of rejection. And that's when relationships stop feeling like survival and start feeling like home. The more you learn about human nature, the more you realize how similar we all are. Everyone's just reacting to the same basic needs: to feel seen, respected, desired, and safe. The methods differ, the language changes, but the roots stay the same. When a man starts to understand that, he doesn't become manipulative. He becomes grounded. He stops judging people by their defenses and starts seeing the fear beneath them. The woman who seems cold is probably protecting herself from disappointment. The man who seems unavailable might be afraid of failing someone emotionally. When you can see that, your perspective softens. You stop needing to dominate because empathy gives you influence without effort. That's what real wisdom does. It quiets you. It doesn't make you louder or more defensive. It makes you selective about what deserves your energy. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing validation from those who can't appreciate it. You stop fighting to prove your worth. Because once you know who you are, you stop auditioning for love. You become it. The funny part is that once you reach that space, the truths that used to sound radical suddenly feel obvious. Things like a people respect boundaries, a consistency builds trust, or honesty creates attraction. None of that feels shocking anymore because it's common sense, just uncommon practice. The real challenge isn't discovering truth. It's living it. It's choosing integrity even when it costs you comfort. It's telling the truth even when it risks rejection. It's walking away when peace costs less than attention. And the irony, that's when you become most attractive. Not because you've mastered some secret, but because calm is magnetic. People who are secure in themselves give off a different frequency. They don't chase, they invite. They don't demand, they attract. They don't panic when things shift because they trust themselves enough to adapt. That's the kind of confidence that can't be taught. It's built through self-awareness. There's also another truth that rarely gets said. The more emotionally intelligent you become, the fewer people you'll connect with deeply. Because surface-level connections won't satisfy you anymore. You won't crave drama or chaos. You'll crave peace. You'll crave understanding. You'll crave mutual effort. And that means you'll walk away from people who aren't ready to meet you there, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. This evolution doesn't make relationships colder. It makes them cleaner. You stop wasting time trying to convince someone of your value. You stop playing games to maintain interest. You stop confusing intensity for intimacy. You start moving differently. You value quiet over noise, stability over attention, substance over performance. And in doing so, you stop fearing that anyone can finish you, because you've already become whole. The truth is, love doesn't end when you understand it. It deepens. It stops being a mystery you need to solve and becomes a space you learn to honor. You stop fearing the differences between men and women and start appreciating them. You realize that polarity isn't about power, it's about balance. So when men truly start to know, when they see past ego and defense and into the reality of what connection demands, women aren't finished. They're relieved. Because they no longer have to perform either. They no longer have to prove their value or fight for understanding. They can finally rest in the presence of someone who listens, who leads with steadiness, who doesn't confuse control with care. That's not the end of something. It's the beginning of what love was supposed to be. The truth isn't meant to divide. It's meant to dissolve illusions. It's meant to clear the noise so that what's real can finally be seen. Once men know, not just intellectually but emotionally, not just logically but spiritually, then the game changes. Not because one side loses, but because both stop playing. And in that quiet, in that balance, love stops being a battlefield and becomes a home. In the end, it all comes down to awareness. Once people truly understand how relationships work, not from ego, not from fear, but from emotional maturity, at the game's end. The phrase once men know, women are finished misses the point. When men really know, when they begin to see through illusion and performance, no one is finished. What's finished are the false dynamics that kept both sides trapped in cycles of blame and defense. What ends is the manipulation, the pretending, the competition for control. What begins is balance. When a man becomes self-aware, he stops reacting from insecurity. He doesn't need to dominate, prove, or impress. He simply is. That kind of calm doesn't threaten women. It reassures them. It creates a space where honesty can live. And when a woman feels emotionally safe, she doesn't need to test, hide, or control either. She softens naturally, not because she's weak, but because safety allows softness to exist. Both people stop fighting for power and start focusing on peace. That's the quiet revolution no one talks about, the one that happens inside individuals before it happens in relationships. The truth is, most people don't need more information about dating. They need healing. They need to unlearn their fears, their patterns, their assumptions about love. They need to learn that love isn't earned through perfection. It's sustained through understanding. When two people reach that point, where self-awareness meets empathy, the relationship transforms. Conflict doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes a space for growth instead of destruction. Arguments become opportunities to understand instead of prove. Boundaries become expressions of care instead of control. That's what knowing really does. It frees you. It removes the desperation that fuels modern dating. It helps you stop chasing what doesn't fit and stop settling for what doesn't feed your peace. You realize that the goal isn't to find someone who completes you, but to find someone who complements your wholeness. Love stops being a transaction and becomes a collaboration. You don't fall into it, you build it, and that's the message beneath all the noise. Once people, men especially, understand their own emotions, their patterns, and their purpose, they stop being manipulated by attraction and start being guided by alignment. They stop looking for excitement and start valuing peace. They stop needing to win and start choosing to connect. When that happens, women aren't finished. They're finally free to meet men as equals, without performance, without fear, without games. The ending of manipulation is the beginning of maturity. The ending of illusion is the start of truth. Once men know, not just with their minds, but with their hearts, everything changes, not because anyone loses, but because both sides finally win, not against each other, but with each other. Because when people stop fighting for control and start striving for understanding, love stops being a struggle and becomes what it was always meant to be, a partnership built on respect, awareness, and peace.